the most important decision that the Friedkins need to make is who is the sporting director or director of football, whatever way you want to label it. In a way, for me, Chris, that decision is more important than who the new manager is going to be. Dan Ashworth, Manchester United sporting director, has left. Yeah. Crazy, really, when you think about the pursuit that Manchester United went on for Dan Ashworth, and it seems like he's just had turmoil in the club from day one. I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is, obviously our director of football, his contract is up at the end of the year. The manager's contract is up at the end of the year. We're obviously, days away, hopefully, from the takeover news. Would Dan Ashworth be not even a viable option, just a person who you would consider, who could come into the club and be a sporting director, be a director of football?
I don't really know a lot about him or what's going on at United. All I can say is that they see Ruben Almiron coming in. Obviously, it's a new start for them. But I mean, I was at, obviously, as you know, the Everton game at Manchester United the previous weekend, and there's a lot of unhappiness still there in terms of the way the club is being run. We all know for years and years they've not liked the Glazers and all what they're about. But with Jim Ratcliffe coming in, supposedly one of their own, a local lad done good, Mancunian, and he was getting as much as the Glazers when I was out. I mean, I was in the thick of it. I was there amongst all the red smoke because it was supposed to be a joint protest because he was against the ticket prices, and I did see one fella in an Everton shirt there, but it did very much seem United dominated. And yeah, there's a lot of unrest at their club, and given obviously they've got all the on the field problems, but off the field as well in terms of the way the club's being run. So yeah, I just think it's a lot greater resources than Everton, and they were still able to win the FA Cup this year before they sacked Erik ten Hag. But yeah, it's not a happy camp, and I think I've seen the result at the weekend and kind of shows. I mean, it really sort of emphasised just how bad that was for Everton going there. I mean, they maybe just think, just want to play Everton every week, because all of a sudden they beat Everton 4-0 and everyone's thinking, everything's all right now. He's turned the corner. They've had the bounce with the new manager. Good times ahead, but it's quickly, a couple of sobering results going down to Arsenal, and then with Forest beating them at Old Trafford. Obviously there's a lot not right there. So I don't know a lot about him personally, so I wouldn't like to say either way. But it's not a good situation that they'd got there at Manchester United. And I just wonder what will happen in the months ahead.
It's almost like it's like a backward situation now that this new manager has come in. It's almost like he's had to move away. Like, I don't know whether he was the one who was back on Almiron.
He didn't want Almiron, did he?
Southgate, he wanted Southgate, didn't he?
So maybe that's why you suspect there's been clear issues, because ultimately you probably got a sporting director who's working with a manager who he didn't want, and he wanted someone else. So
we've had that before.
Probably tells the story, doesn't it, why it's gone wrong or why it's going wrong. And I think as well, reading some of the Manchester Evening News' coverage around this yesterday, there's issues over transfers and who brought what player in and stuff like that. And obviously, Everton are accused of wasting a lot of money. And I don't want to turn this into a Man United podcast, but my God, they wasted some money on some below par players as well. And certainly this summer, by the looks of it, they wasted a lot more money on players who don't look anywhere near good enough to get them back within the top four picture. So, yeah, I think the big override thing I thought yesterday was that by all accounts he didn't seem too keen on Almiron. And maybe that probably tells you why he's probably heading for the Exes, because let's face it, you can't have a sporting director in there who didn't want that manager he's not going to work with.
Well, I'll come off the fence then now. If anyone thought that Gareth Southgate was the man to turn Manchester United round, don't want him coming anywhere near Everton. There you go. Get him more emphatic than that.
Emphatic from Chris there. Someone saying Ashworth is another Steve Walsh. A few comments coming in. I mean,
it's also worth pointing out as well. I mean,
he's done well at Brighton and the FA and stuff like that, hasn't he?
He doesn't stick around long, does he? And he's always looking to go somewhere. You look at, Brighton, Newcastle, Man United. He basically forced his way out of Brighton to get to Newcastle, forced his way out of Newcastle to get to Man United. First chance to go anywhere different or somewhere
smart. More money, isn't it? Be more money.
He tends to jump ship. So
if you just turn it back around to us a little bit, obviously, if things go to plan, when I say things go to plan, results pick up, Dyche would stay till the end of the season. Obviously, you'd expect Thelwell to stay to the end of the season. But in the meantime, the new owners have come in, the Friedkins have come in, and then say, let's just speculate here that both of them leave, the contracts aren't renewed. The most important decision that the Friedkins need to make is who is the sporting director or director of football, whatever way you want to label it. In a way, for me, Chris, that decision is more important than who the new manager is going to be, because the infrastructure behind the club is more important than kind of who would be the head coach on a day-to-day basis. If you bring in a manager, if you bring in a head coach who's successful, Everton aren't in a position really where they can fend off big clubs who come after the manager at the time. If we were to bring in a manager who's successful, let's fingers crossed that is the case. But at least then, if we've got the infrastructure, the director of football, the team behind building the club and appointing the manager, like Brighton have done. Yeah. Basically, they've lost a couple of managers over the years, but they've managed to just replace it. Bang, we've got a new one in straight away. They know what the philosophy of the club. The director of football is the most important decision the Friedkins are ever going to make. Would you agree with that?
I get where you're coming from. There's an ideal example, isn't it, with Brighton, that the fact that the head coaches, as they would be, wouldn't they, because they probably wouldn't be managers, I guess, at Brighton, can come and go, and it's not a problem, is it? Whether it's Potter, De Zerbi, and they've just had that smooth transition, and Hurtzler this season, because imagine as brilliantly as Fabian Hurtzler is doing at Brighton, he couldn't have come into Everton and done anything that sort of job, because it's totally different circumstances. So they're the actual ideal model, aren't they, in terms of getting it right. And this is a club. I'm talking about, actually 5 minutes ago, I was talking about all the things that Everton have done in the past. Brighton have never won a major trophy yet. That makes there's no good Everton saying, if you know your history now and saying we did this, that and the other. It's all about, that makes no relevance in 2024. So, yeah, Brighton are getting the right thing. I totally understand where you're coming from. But for me, the manager's always the most important individual at any football club in my eyes. But I totally understand where you're coming from with that point in terms of the importance for the Friedkin group of actually allowing a director of football, if indeed you are going to have one, because the jury is still very much out. And whether it's not really been a success at Everton, the three different individuals they've had there, you can't say it's been a success, because it's just been downward spiral in terms of the fortunes. So if you are going to have a director of football, you have to let them, as you say, build that proper structure in place to be the director of football in the way that they need to operate, because we know Marcel Brands was being undermined from the start in terms of what was going on with Farhad Moshiri and the managerial appointments, and then people coming in who he didn't want and then pursuing other targets. I mean, he tells that tale about I was in Mikel Arteta's house and trying to get him for Everton, and obviously Moshiri goes in another direction. So yeah, if done properly, I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of that and getting the structure right, because that's what Everton have failed to do under the Farhad Moshiri. But for me, a manager's always the most important person at a football club. But I totally understand what you mean in terms of getting that right. So you can actually go through managers, and it's not necessarily the end of the world, because you actually bring somebody in who has a similar philosophy or can take it on from the last guy. Whereas that's totally the opposite. It's what happened at Everton. You've veered from one extreme to another in terms of the managers and their skill set. So yeah,
slight difference of opinion then between me and Chris. Connor, what side of the fence are you going to sit on?
I'm actually going to sit on the fence, because I agree in a way with both. Yeah, I think I get with Chris, because I think the head coach has got to have some sort of power, haven't he? Because if the head coach has got no power or the manager's got no power, you suspect that makes things very difficult in the dressing room, because the first time of trouble, people are just going to be like, well, you're going to go and be replaced anyway, so what does it really matter? But I think it all comes down to when the Friedkins come in, they've got to have an approach and a kind of an idea of what they want Everton to look like. What do they want to make Everton Football Club? What ways do they want to go with this? Because I think the problem we've seen under the Moshiri tenure is that we've just gone from one extreme to the other, haven't we? And back again, and then we go to this side again, and we've gone from we're going to throw loads of money at it and bring loads of players in to let's start trying to box clever with transfers, and let's try and do this, and you just end up at like what we've witnessed over the last 4 years of just basically a team that's been thrown together from, is it 5 different managers and 3 directors of football, I think is the team basic, is the team some weeks. So that's never And within that, you've got 5 different managers in there, by the way, as well. Like, no, they're not all like it's like the Brighton train where it's like everyone plays the same way. You've got 5 managers in there who all play very different ways. And so I think it's all on the Friedkins, really, because I think we need to see what they want to do and what their aim is to do, and what they want Everton to look like. And then from there, you can then start to build a kind of almost like a case study of like, well, he'd be the perfect actor of football, sport actor. He'd be the perfect head coach or manager. We're going to target players of ages between like 21 and 25 who we might accept that they're doing well and they're going to come to us, and in 2 to 3 years we could then maybe sell them on to higher clubs, like what Brighton have done with, Casado and people like that, where they bring them in 2 or 3 years and then they sell them on for a high price, and they accept that they're going to do that. The Friedkins might turn around and say, well, that's what we want to do. We want to scour the world, get some good young talent in, and accept that in 2 to 3 years, if they blossom to their full potential, we will shake hands and say thanks, and off you go somewhere else. They might turn around and say, well, we don't want to do that. We want to get players who are 25 to 28 who are proven quality, and we want to keep them and get the best their best years out of them. So I think it's all on the Friedkins, isn't it? And that's why I know we harp on about it time and time again, and it's probably the most talked sentence and talked about issue. It's just the takeover just needs completing as soon as possible, because once that is, we can then start to get a bit of clarity and a bit of understanding, and try and understand what the Friedkins want to do and what they want to achieve. Because at the minute, we don't have a clue, do we? Because we don't even know if they're going to actually end up owning the football club. Touch wood, they do, but we don't know, do we? Because it's just still ongoing. The process is still ongoing.
I think me and Chris, obviously, we're both right in a sense. I just think, from my point of view, you could bring in this fantastic young manager who builds himself up, develops with the club, might even looking into the stars here, goes and wins as a trophy. But we consider ourselves a big club in the Everton bubble, because I think we are. We know we are, but outside, if a bigger club, whether it was a domestic or European club, came in for that said manager, I just think they'd just go. So I just think that's why the most important thing, the infrastructure, got to be in place.
Recruitment, don't you? Because you look at United now. I mean, not to harp on United, but they've got a manager who likes to play 3 at the back. But how many of their backline can play 3 at the back? So that's, again, a process that's going to take a long time to overhaul, because
you need recruitment. You need to buy players who fit that system.
And like I say, now they've got a manager who likes to play 3-4-3. But how many defenders can play 3-4-3? Probably not many. Without isolating them or exposing them. So again, you've got to have an idea of what you want, and I think as well, Everton fans need to realise, and this isn't being patronising, but it's going to take time. Like, I don't think anyone expects the Friedkins to come in and wave a magic wand, and in 2 months we'll be winning games of football all the time. We'll get to the summer transfer window and we'll offload a load of players and bring a load of players in. It'll take time. And, you look at the last 5 years, bad decisions have led to us being where we are now. We might have 5 years of good decisions, but we could be 5 years away from being back to that top 6, top 7 competing team. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Obviously, this is probably a really bad example, because they've had quality players there for a while now, but you only have to look at the neighbours across the park, Liverpool. They've obviously lost the manager, but they've had a complete reshuffle or a restructure of their hierarchy, and then they brought in a head coach rather than a manager. And don't get me wrong, it could all end up going south for them, but it's been a very seamless, smooth transition for them since Klopp has left, and I think that is because they've had certain things in place that has enabled that.
Back to that way, doesn't it? Recruitment, they've got good players.
Well, I think
the best defender in the world, or one of the best defenders in the world, one of the best forwards in the world. And that's a big. No, it's like any manager, isn't it? If you're, it's like Ronald Koeman, isn't it? Koeman done really well in his first season at Everton, but yet inherited Romelu Lukaku at the time, one of the most prolific goal scorers in European football. So it's a big help, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think I certainly don't want to be singing the Liverpool's praises for too much on the Royal Blue podcast, but I think what they've done very well, their owners, it's what I'd like to see from the Friedkin group, is they've left the football decisions to football people, and that's been the problem under Managerial, just getting involved, messing about all the time and undermining football people. with the John Henry and Werner, they've very much just concentrated on the business side of things. I know they've had their ups and downs with that, and obviously there's been times when a lot of the fans are frustrated over various issues. But if you look at where the club was at when they came in there, obviously it was that infamous derby. The last time Everton won at Goodison previous to the last derby was 2010 when the new owners first came in there, Henry and Werner. If you look at what the club was like that and the way they've grown in terms of the expansion of Anfield and the way I know there was the whole European Super League debacle, but they've left the football and decisions to the footballing people, and that's what I want to see from the Friedkins. We know that they're successful business people. They've had the fingers burnt a bit at Roma with what's gone on this year. Hopefully they've learned from those mistakes without Roma really being, I don't think, in any sort of genuine danger of their Serie A status being under threat, and then appoint the right people, bring the right infrastructure in place, and then they can stick to the business side of things. And then whoever is the director of football and who is the head coach / manager, let them get on with their jobs. That's what I'd like to see, rather than sort of the hands-on approach, people meddling in things that they don't really understand.
I think I'm going to sound really stupid here, but it's a decision from the Friedkins that should be made really simple and not overcomplicated. From the outside looking in, based on what I've seen at Roma, they don't really know too much about the footballing world. So, if I was the Friedkins, which I'm not, and I haven't got
$10 billion.
Yeah, I would first of all try and have an idea of how you want to try and play the game, and they probably don't think like that. But what I would do is, if they've gone to watch a football match anywhere in the world, let's just say, for example, let's just use Barcelona as an example, who likes possession, keep hold of the ball, tiki-taka, football. If that's how the Friedkins have watched the match and say that's how we want to play, then they employ people, footballing people, on how to go about, how to, replicate how Barcelona play, their infrastructure. That's just a simple way of putting it for me. I don't know if you agree, but as we know, these things can be overcomplicated, and it takes time.
We'll probably just spoil the show here for when the Friedkins takeover gets completed.
Yeah, but what you don't do is you don't go from Ronald Koeman to Sam Allardyce to Marco Silva to Carlo Ancelotti
to Rafa Benitez.
Yeah. Trot them all out, but you just don't, that's what you don't do. So
that's what I'm saying before about just to finish. We've got a squad that's been compiled by 3 directors of football, 5 or 6 managers who all play contrasting ways of football and believe football should be played in varying ways. So it's a mess, and I think we've seen that mess with our own eyes over the last few years, but hopefully better times are ahead.
The Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.